Hello again, everyone. So we're back for the final session of today. The annual meeting of the Knowledge Network on Climate Assemblies is soon coming to an end. But let me first see if you're still out there. Would you, everyone, please turn on your cameras and just give us a sense that we're still all here. Good to see you waving. All right. So we've been through an eventful day so far, and I'm very grateful to everyone who's participated. We're going into a presentation of the third of the 3 knowledge development projects that we are looking at today. Now, this one is about key drivers in effective climate assemblies, and it's going to be presented to us by the lead, who is Eva, I think. Actually, Eva Rovers or Eva Rovers. Maybe Eva, you can clarify that in a moment when I pass you the word.
I will clarify.
She's done this together with Yves. Oh, actually, I'm doing terribly with names now. Dejaeghere, I suppose, but clearly pronouncing names at this time of day is not my primary skill set. Luckily, however, I think we can still manage to get safely into the presentation. Now, I'll just remind everyone that you can ask questions at the end. So if you reflect on any questions as we go along, please note them in the chat or make a note for yourself so you can share them when we get to the Q&A. As always, Frederick will take over and guide us safely through a panel discussion. But without any further ado, Eva, the word is yours.
Thank you so much, Mark and Frederick, everybody at Knoca and at DBT for all your incredible hard work and for guiding us through the process of this research project, which we greatly enjoyed, and we were very honored to be part of this first knowledge development program. My name is Eva Rovers, or Rovers, whatever you want to call us, okay. And I conducted this research together with Yves Dejaeghere, who is the director of FIDE, the Federation for the Innovation of Democracy in Europe, and myself, I am involved with Burgerberaad, which is a Dutch organization pushing for climate assemblies in the Netherlands. I will try to share my screen and guide you through the yeah, here we are. Guide you through our research. I hope. Do you see it properly? No. Now you do? Okay, wonderful. Well, if the 2010s were the decade of the deliberative wave, as the OECD has called it, I think the 2020s will be the decade of the green deliberative wave in Europe. Since the Convention Citoyenne pour le Climat in France in 2019, a rapid rise in the number of climate assemblies has occurred. And all these climate assemblies have the aim to have some sort of impact, whether it's new climate policies, increasing awareness on climate change, increasing trust in democratic systems, or equipping democratic systems for long-term decision-making. And our research has focused on what does make this impact. But before we turn to our outcomes, I would like to focus on this on impact itself. What is impact, and how did we define it in our research? Because very often impact of climate assemblies or impact of citizens' assemblies more broadly is mainly understood as policy impact. To what extent have the recommendations been translated into law? And this is of course very important, but it's also a very limited understanding of what potential impacts may be. So in our research, we have distinguished 2 other forms of impact as well, a social impact and systemic level impact. So systemic impact. To give you a little bit more insight into how we consider these forms of impact, first is policy impact can mean various things. So as it is often understood, new climate laws, new climate policies, but also more robust or more coherent, more legitimate climate policy. Also, an impact of climate assemblies can be that the decision-making process is being sped up, or it can help to shift attitudes of politicians or policymakers towards climate change. And it can help the debate on the political debates on climate change. But also it can level the playing field for the political debate on climate by providing a counterbalance to established lobby groups. And also another form of impact would be more collaboration between political parties on climate change. Well, the social impact is a little bit different. For instance, more public debate on climate change. Also, for instance, more media attention, more op-eds, more online traction, but also countering disinformation and also countering the power of established lobby groups. That might be a very interesting social impact that climate assemblies can have. Also, they can lead to more awareness on climate change among the broad public and among civil society. And very important, I think, is that climate assemblies may help to give a voice to younger generations on their thoughts on climate change and views of the future. And of course, ideally, a climate assembly may lead to behavioral change in society. Participants of climate assemblies often indicate that the assembly has transformed them, that it has been a transformative experience, and they make more sustainable lifestyle choices by acting as spokesperson. And by acting as spokesperson, they can also cause some kind of ripple effect. And then the third form of impact is what we call systemic impact, which means that they do not only have a transformative effect on the participants or on policy, but also on the democratic system as a whole. For instance, by more democratic empowerment amongst the public at large. For instance, people who become more politically active and more willing to fight climate change. Also, they can empower underrepresented groups by showing young people and people from marginalized communities that people like them can actually take part in an ambitious decision-making process. And of course, it can help, and we very much hope so, climate assemblies can help to increase trust in the democratic system. It can help increase trust in politics, and perhaps also very important, increase trust in citizens on the part of policymakers as well as citizens themselves. So these are all forms of impact. The question is how to realize those forms of impact. Well, most conveners and designers of climate assemblies agree that a sound process is a key prerequisite for impact. So most assemblies adhere to the good practice principles formulated by the OECD, and implementing these principles is a minimal requirement for legitimacy and therefore for impact. But are these good practice principles equally important, and perhaps are there other key factors? Well, through literature research and in-depth interviews with policymakers, practitioners, media professionals, academics, we've identified 3 key drivers of impact. And we find that given a well-run process, of course, 2 design principles are in particular main drivers of impact. The question, or as the OECD calls it the purpose. And the other one is accountability, or the mandate and the political follow-up. But a third key factor has received very little attention up until now, both in research and in practice. And this is a robust, inclusive communication strategy. Communication should really be a significant part of the strategy and the budget of a climate assembly in order for them to have impact. Well, to give an indication of some of our recommendations. Of course, these are just a selection of our recommendations. Please read our full report, which is on the Knoca website, how to unleash the potential of climate assemblies. But we want to give you some idea of these recommendations. First of all, with regard to the question, defining the question or the task of a climate assembly means defining its impact. So the scope of the question should fit the purpose. A broad scope may help to kickstart a public debate, but a broad scope of the question may also have limitations. It can lead to a large number of recommendations, which increases the risk of cherry picking by the commissioning authority. So our recommendations would be to really formulate an ambitious question. It should be relevant both to policymakers as well as to the public. Something has to be at stake. If it's not relevant, if the question is not politically relevant, it will be difficult to ensure political follow-up. And if it's not relevant to the public, it will do very little for public trust or the public debate. Also, it's very important to have the question reviewed by people who have experience in engaging young people, and also other groups that are usually underrepresented in participatory processes. These people can advise on comprehensibility, clarity, but also ask a communication expert to give feedback on formulating the question. So what would make it more comprehensible, more attractive, more engaging? And finally, both the social and systemic impact increase when participants or even the wider society are engaged in setting the agenda. So broader public may, for instance, have the opportunity to suggest topics or to choose from a range of options. Now, I will go through these very quickly because I see I'm running out of time. With regard to the mandate, however ambitious and well-formulated question, and however well-run the assembly, its policy impact will be negated if the recommendations do not receive proper political follow-up. So chances of policy impact increase when the legislative body supports the mandate, and also the commissioning of the assembly. So a detailed follow-up plan should really be in place, should be formulated beforehand, and this roadmap should indicate when and how the commissioning authority will respond to the recommendations. Also, citizens' assemblies are a new phenomenon to many civil servants. So in order for them to provide meaningful follow-up, they need to be comfortable with the process. And therefore, organizing workshops for civil servants can really help to guarantee a meaningful follow-up process. Then finally, the communication strategy. As I said before, this is something, seems to be a blank spot in many citizens' assemblies. In order for a climate assembly to be perceived as legitimate by people not taking part, and for its outcomes to be understood and supported, it needs to be visible and a recognized part of society. In order to very often, communication strategy is developed on the go, and outreach to media is very generic and highly dependent on the context that conveners happen to have. So we would recommend to, as early as possible, hire a professional media or communication team for strategy, and also that communication really shouldn't be an afterthought. It really should be a significant part of the strategy and of the budget. Also, journalists should be helped. You can create content such as short articles, summaries, ready-to-use social media posts, and it's also very important to differentiate in various forms of various types of media, so video, text, social media content. And finally, our final recommendation, which is a very difficult one. We understand that very well. Oh, sorry, no, the next to final is that communication strategy is often very much focused on intrinsic values, so the need for climate mitigation, the need for sustainability. But we found that communication should also include reference to egoistic values, personal values, such as personal growth and financial benefits. Engage people not only with rational arguments, but with emotional arguments as well. And the final one, even for experienced communication experts, developing an effective communication strategy is very challenging. The deliberative process does not align with most media formats. Most media formats use conflict, drama, binary pro-con framing. And as a result, journalists often find it very difficult to report on relatively harmonious climate assemblies. And major media outlets are hard to convince that climate assemblies are a captivating narrative. So although these deliberative processes are at odds with regular binary and conflict-based media formats, some journalists and media outlets are paving the way for new forms of journalism. And I think advocates and organizers of climate assemblies should actively support and invest in these emerging forms of journalism, for instance, by co-creating workshops or seminars with journalists and media outlets. Because we think new forms of democracy also require new forms of journalism. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Eva. I just had to find the unmute button. Problem solved. Thank you for this very interesting presentation and for all your hard work, both you, Eva, and Yves. And without further ado, I think we should dive into the panel discussion. And for that, we've invited three very interesting panelists. So the first one is Teele Pekh. And again, like Mark, I'm not the best at different types of names and different types of languages, so maybe you should repeat it on your own, Teele. But you currently work as the process designer of the Estonian climate collaboration initiative called the Green Tiger. And then we have Yves, who's a policy analyst from the OECD's Open Government Unit. And I don't dare to say your last name, so you probably need to say it yourself. And you've been co-authoring some of these OECD reports that Eva was referring to. So, for example, the one on catching the deliberative wave. And last but not least, we have Roberto Falanga, who is a postdoc researcher at the Institute of Social Sciences at the University of Lisbon, who's also been collaborating with the Urban Planning and Participation Department at the Lisbon City Council. A warm welcome to you all. I think it's natural. So Eva mentioned that there are these three key drivers for impact: remit, mandate, and communication strategy. And as we've just had a whole session on the remit, I think it's natural to start there because we didn't necessarily consider it from the point of view of impact. So I was wondering whether you have some reflections on in the report that you might have seen, even Yves touched upon this consideration or balance between having a more precise remit or question and a more broad question, and whether have you been and I can't speak right now, but have you been involved in designing some of these remits? That was what I wanted to say. And what have your considerations been? And if you haven't, do you have any general reflections on this trade-off in terms of what type of impact you can have? Maybe we can start with Teele.
Yeah, hi, thank you. I'm Teele Pekh, a very Dutch sounding name, but I'm from Estonia. So shortly, the Green Tiger Foundation is cross-sectoral collaboration platform for systemic change in Estonia and in the world. So we work with businesses, more than 60 businesses, with civil society, mainly environmental organizations, and with all individuals in Estonia. But Estonia is a tiny country, so it's big. And I advocate and organize climate assemblies within the Green Tiger because I see them as a very useful and impactful format for accelerating climate actions and also enriching democracy. But let me also congratulate Knoca, because we are just beginners with climate assemblies, but thanks to Knoca and Graham, personally also, we have access to all the experience that you have had in previous years, and all the thinking and analysis and everything. It's brilliant, it's great, and it's so practical. So a big thank you, a big applause. Yes, you can imitate it.
Thanks.
And greetings to maybe we'll recover soon. About the remit, I would maybe broaden it a bit. We've just had 2 climate assemblies in Estonia within the last 8 months. One was regional and only with youth, but in a very hard context, the just transition area, and with mostly Russian-speaking inhabitants. It was bilingual also. The other one was municipal, just finished recently, Tartu, the second biggest town in Estonia, 100,000 people only, on sustainable mobility. And with both of these assemblies, we the graphic, that Eva and Yves you provided concerning the impact, these things for us are kind of elementary. We don't initiate an assembly without actually having the follow-up plan, even if it's raw, even if it's has some elements. But we say, okay, the town of Tartu, you need to respond in 1 month after we have finalized the active process of an assembly. And the same goes with the remit also, that we maybe 80% of the time that we prepared the assembly, and that took 3 months with Tartu town, we dedicated for actually kind of defining the problem, because the starting point with Tartu was also that they wanted to experiment the format, which was very nice, very good starting point for us. But we said that, okay, we will come and help you. We will be the guardians of the climate assembly as a standardized and international format, but only if you are willing to kind of share the lessons learned later and hopefully have next ones, and maybe also institutionalize them. So we have our own agenda, so to say, here. And then we are trying to get the public sector motivated, involved, and inspired. I didn't answer about the remit, sorry. Somebody else has a better answer.
No worries, thank you very much. But it also seems as if you think along the lines of both remit and follow-up at the same time, so that it fits in one way or the other. Roberto, can I bring you into the discussion? Any views on whether the scope of the remit in terms of ensuring impact in the end?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me, and maybe just a couple of words, introductory words on why Lisbon is here. Lisbon, so the new executive power in Lisbon announced the first citizen assembly this year, and the idea is to have at least one per year. And we had the first one in mid-May, 14 and 15, so it was a weekend. And the main topic of this first citizen assembly was climate change. That said, the city council would like to organize the future citizen assemblies on different topics. So we don't know actually whether climate change will be the topic for the second, the third, the fourth. We don't know, but so I'm here also to say something about the first citizen assembly, and also to position myself apart from being researcher, as you said, Frederick, I'm also the coordinator of the monitoring and evaluation of the Citizen Assembly Lisbon. So I'm here also to share some insights on this first Citizen Assembly. Now, thinking about the question, the scope of the question, and whether the question has had some good impacts on the quality of deliberation in this in the Citizen Assembly, I can also share what question was asked to the participants, which was, I'm trying to translate it from Portuguese as, what should we do to face climate change in Lisbon? So it was a quite broad question. It worked, but what's interesting to me to highlight in this panel is also the way the question was formulated. The question was formulated by the Environment Department of the Lisbon City Council, and the first formulation of this question was shared with the organizing committee, which was composed of different members of other departments and also external agencies to the city council, like the university in the role of the evaluator, but also a couple of other agencies responsible for the stratified random selection of 50 participants, and also another agency which was responsible for the moderation of the Citizen Assembly. The idea of the Lisbon City Council is to, from the second Citizen Assembly, is to have also an advisory board that can help formulate the question, which to us is something that could improve the quality of the question and how the question could fit better also some quality standards in this sense. One of the recommendations that we provided to the City Council after this first experience is also to think about how to prepare the question with citizens. So how to maybe, for example, propose 3, 4, 5 key topics that the City Council is keen to work on and to work through the Citizen Assembly, and open the selection with citizens, which could be also a first step to formulate the question together with citizens, or to test the question, as someone said this morning, with citizens. So yeah.
Cool, very interesting, thank you. And Yves, both considerations about the remit, I know that you may have seen a lot of them from studying these different processes, but also maybe some kind of considerations on its interrelation with the follow-up and the impact.
Well, thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Very happy to be here as well. My name is Ieva Cesnulaityte. I know it's complicated, so that's no worries for not being able to pronounce it. So I've worked at the OECD for close to 4 years around these questions now, and writing all of these reports, the Catching the Deliberative Wave and the evaluation guidelines that I'm an author of as well, and others. I think this is a very interesting and important discussion. And so my reflections around this is that there are different purposes, in my view, of formulating different kinds of questions. So in a way, at the OECD, we recommend very focused and very clear questions for assemblies and juries to maximize policy impact, because this is the lens that we take. So, and I think this works, and from what we've seen, this works quite well when you have a very clear remit, very clear question that is well, quite precise, and the government knows exactly what they're going to do with it, how they're going to use the recommendations that they've made commitment from the very beginning. But I also do see the value of these broader questions that are there maybe more to start the discussion, to raise awareness, to change the behavior, and to garner some of that energy for the public debate. However, I feel that it might be a bit harder to show to the participants and maybe the broader public and the government the impacts of the assembly that has a broader question, because there's not a clear link to policy making. And so we see that this clear link to policymaking motivates both the policymakers to initiate more assemblies and also members of the jury to actually participate, keeps them engaged because they do see how their time is valuable. So I think both types of, assemblies are needed, but probably there's a need to focus a little bit more. How do we show the time we use in an assembly that's a bit broader, how it actually made a difference, and that it was worth it. I see this sort of a challenge, maybe a little bit. And in terms of formulating the question as well, what I see that has worked is to, like the report here also mentions, to have a very clear question that is really reviewed by people that, for simple language, for not a bureaucratic high-level entrance to understanding the question, which I really agree with, and I think it's really important. And this, however, to maintain the complexity of the question and to be fair to the issue, I find it also very helpful to put more of the details in the preamble of the question. So I think it's also something we have to think about. What do we put in the little preamble introducing the question to it, the narrative, how people relate to it, and then the question itself. So I don't want to take up too much.
No worries.
Reflections.
Thank you very much for that insightful input. And I guess in some ways it also ties into what Eva said about having different types of impact. So you could have the considerations around the scope of the question also relates to what type of impact you're actually aiming at. Great, so thank you for that. I just want to bring in Eva and Yves to the discussion too. So what strikes me when I look at your work is that one of your key drivers is the communication strategy. And maybe that's something that we've missed to address sometimes or think about. So I know you've already mentioned some recommendations, but do you have any good examples of how you could think about making a very strong communication strategy in these cases? Yves, I can see that you're unmuted.
I'm unmuted.
Yeah, so you can just go.
I mean, there's several elements that Eva already highlighted, and I think I'd be interested to hear the panelists also on this. There are, of course, different strategies, and a lot of them, for example, focus, if you look at bringing the members to the attention and giving them a big role. For example, the film Les 150 or the documentary highlights very well how this was transformative for the members of the Climate Assembly, and this can lead to societal impact. What we do here a lot, and I heard it again Friday in an evaluation meeting in the Oost-Belgian region, is that it's very hard for media to actually touch the content of the. So I think a format that seems to work is that focusing on those members, and they like to pick out a member that's a very unlikely participant very often, or but I would like to hear the members how they of the panel, how they experienced, for example, trying to also get that, in this case, climate topics to the attention of the media, and if they had some good experiences or some frustrations with that.
Yeah, sure.
Eva, do you want to add something? But I'd like to give the floor to the panelists whilst we have 10 minutes left for that.
Yeah, let's do that. Teele, Roberto, Eva, anybody?
Really have frustrations regarding including or engaging the media. It's really, really difficult, as you pointed out in the fabulous report as well. And one thing is also Green Tiger Foundation, we are around 15 people. So it took me maybe 1.5 years actually to convince our communications people and explain like what is the assembly format, why do we need to integrate it into the systemic change we want to achieve on the state level, and and we're aiming for a national climate assembly as well for 2 years already. It will take more time, so it's a lot of work. But then the case with Tartu, the municipal assembly, just recent one, what really we had the Tartu communications department really actively there as the co-organizer, and as the commissioner, as the co-organizer, and then as the responsible body for implementing the recommendations. We will hear about that tomorrow, actually. And they found that this, we called the random sample mini Tartu, and that was very catchy for the local journalists also and media, like how to frame it. Like, we're not talking about random sample and stratification and all that. No, skip these words. Just use the mini society or mini Tartu or mini public. Mini publics is also a bit too complex, I guess. But we found a word, and that was like, even the participants, they were also like, oh, we are actually now the mini Tartu. They felt really proud. So it works. But still, there's a lot of our lesson learned is definitely a very profound communication strategy, going through all the phases, like pre-phase, during the assembly, follow-up phase, and monitoring of the implementation of the recommendations. So we can do much better, but with this one, we were thinking that, okay, let's do the, what to say, minimum requirements, and we'll improve the different things that we can, including the communications next process.
Yeah, sure, Yves, just go ahead.
No, Frederick, I don't want to steal your thunder here, but just as you guys respond, I would be, because one of the things, Teele and Ieva and Roberto, please feel free to then give your experiences. But if the means are short, like you said, yeah, we had to focus. Where is more? Where do you get most money? You know, most bang for your buck, as they say in English. If you have to focus on a few things in communication, like let's say you have to pick the first things, what would be like? Make sure you have this and this in place if you can't do everything, or and same for the two other panelists. Again, sorry, Frederick, to
no worries, that's perfectly fine.
I can say something about Lisbon. This part of the communication was actually one of the most interesting one to me. I mean, I understand communication strategy as communication before, during, and after the, and focusing on the before. In Lisbon, we had a couple of challenges which were interconnected, of course. So on the one hand, we had to explain what a citizen assembly was. And on the other hand, we had to focus on the topic, on climate change. While the topic was, we had the feeling that it was quite familiar to Lisboners. The citizen assembly was the real new thing. And that mattered. And that mattered because when we look at the data of people who got involved in the citizen assembly, we see that there are some trends of people that registered to the citizen assembly. And let me open a disclaimer here, because the communication, at least in the case of Lisbon, is very much connected to the way the stratified random selection is done. So in the case of Lisbon, the random selection was on a database of registered citizens. It was not a selection of the whole population of Lisbon. And this mattered because since it was based on the registration of citizens, the communication had to be very much focused on the most marginalized groups of the city, you know, so those citizens that for very different reasons have more difficulties to have a voice. And this was only partially done. And this was clear from the data that we retrieved about the participants. For example, we had more than 60% of people participating to the citizen assembly with higher education. So, you know, these kind of biases. So the very question at this moment is, if we keep this type of selection, how can we improve the communication in order to, you know, prevent from this type of biases in the next citizen assembly? In case we change the type of selection, so for example, we do a random selection with the population of Lisbon, what type of communication strategy do we need? You know, so I think that the communication is also very much linked to the way you select people, basically.
Interesting. Thank you very much, Roberto. I really,
if I can add also something on this.
Yeah, sure. if you can do it very short, because time is running and it's a good discussion, but I also want to bring in some of the questions from the chat. But you go,
okay.
Eva.
Okay, no worries. I'll be brief. No, I just wanted to say that I do agree very much with the proposition that the personal stories of participants are a very good way to go forward, because since, you know, we want the citizens' voice to be part of public decision making, but also of the public discourse, and also, you know, we want these voices to be heard on the media in a way. So like this is also a way, a start to re-educate in a sense the media. And like I've heard these stories where, you know, journalists were invited to cover deliberative process, but then they go directly to the one politician that is there to give the opening remark versus the actual citizens that participate in this, which is an issue. So I also find the recommendations around educating journalists and helping them cover this, whom they have to actually ask an interview to get the best insight, could be very helpful. In a way, I think also an idea of potentially having a rotating spokesperson from the citizens, maybe, could be an interesting thing. But of course, only from those participants that feel comfortable around this and they want to speak and they want to represent. But I mean, I completely agree that the narrative that they can bring, and also the kind of language that they use, because this is an issue that, like, you know, the process that they've been involved very recently and the way that they explain it to their family or the people around them are going to be way more understandable to the other citizens that really don't know what about the issue or the process. So I think this way we can also filter out some bureaucratic and complicated language that we're so used to, and that's all of the words that are so familiar to us, or let's say to politicians involved. So yeah, stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. Really good points, Eva. Stine, I know there are some questions in the chat, and we want to address them.
Yes, we have some questions and also some comments, and I think I will just compile the questions here. Sylvia asks how long the process of climate assemblies need to be in order to enhance impact potential. For example, to deliberate on the agenda, we would have to add at least 1 day, is the question, of work for citizens. And then Pierre is asking, what's your view on climate assemblies, including citizens from outside the actual deliberation? And then Ellie is asking, considering the follow-up, in what specific ways do you think participants should be supported to advocate for their recommendations? I think that's enough for now. There's a lot of questions.
All right, thank you very much. Anybody who feels eager to jump on one of them? Eva?
I think with regard to the first comment or question, I think time frame is very important. That also links to a sound process. There needs to be enough time to be able to set the agenda, to be able to have a proper deliberation, to be able to formulate well thought out recommendations. These are all very, very important to have either policy impact or social impact. So in this sense, time is important, but also in the sense that I think these deliberative processes gain impact the more often they are organized. So it's also a matter of organizing them more often, regularly, so that it becomes something that the wider audience knows, that there's a larger chance that people are being selected, and it also becomes more and more part of the public debate. So in that sense, time is, I think, important as well. And also with the second question about how to engage the wider audience, I think for one of the examples we use in the report, because we also showcase some practical examples from climate assemblies all around Europe. One of the examples is the Amsterdam Assembly, where beforehand all citizens of Amsterdam were asked to provide input. So to say what kind of information, if they had any information, if they had any suggestions for experts, they could add that to, submit that to the Citizens Assembly. And that was a very good way to engage the wider audience.
Great, thank you, Eva. Anybody wants to elaborate or add? Maybe address the third question.
Yeah, I might, if you don't mind, I can speak the third and also say something about the first. The third, in Lisbon, one of the decisions that was taken by the city council was to invite participants to select ambassadors. So actually yesterday we had the first meeting with around 12, 13 ambassadors. And those ambassadors are required to follow the implementation. Well, actually, first the acceptance or rejection of the recommendations, and then the implementation of the recommendations, which means the incorporation of those recommendations in the agenda. This seems to be quite new to us in terms of what's going on. But I mean, I would like to hear from you whether this is actually so new or not. But and about the first, So sorry, just about this third point. Yeah.
Maybe a more general note from me. I think we need to design all the green deliberations for impact. So we have to consider design for impact, not just replicating the format for the sake of testing the format, which we did in Tartu, but with a longer agenda and aim. So because we cannot afford spending public money, energy, and maybe trust of citizens and public officials on just doing them for the sake of climate assemblies. So, but then even Eva, in your report, you have the policy impact outlined, and with the climate assemblies, I feel that we are mainly craving for that impact. At least in Estonia we do, and in Europe I think also. So more robust, legitimate, coherent climate policy and all that, speeding up decision making and actually implementing the decisions made collectively. But we don't see that fast developments there. But then on the other side, we see on the social impact, and I'm hoping also on the systemic impact. So these two impact fields are quite well covered, or there is impact, proven impact, but then like how to get this policy impact faster and accelerate that. That's I don't know the answer, but I think that's a huge challenge, because we don't want the climate assemblies to be just a political fashion.
Definitely. Thank you, Teele. Eva, you're raising your hand, or?
It was very interesting. Last Friday, it was a closed meeting, an evaluation meeting with politicians and citizens in Belgium after 3 years of and a few installments. And actually, also the politicians said it was frustrating for them that in one of the assemblies there wasn't really a good click of the question of where they were in the policy cycle and the work. And they said it was frustrating for us to say no to several recommendations. And the citizens, and that's why they had a closed meeting without media, so they could be a bit honest. Citizens said, yeah, we felt that going through it, and it was frustrating for us too. So actually, also, citizens were actually more demanding to know a bit from politicians ahead. I don't know what your experience again is, also Yeva and Roberto. Citizens said it would be also good to know a bit where we can have most impact, so you can take it into the policy cycle and do something with it. So I don't know if that resonates a bit. It's also from the politicians' side. If you do it several times, they were much more keen to know, like, okay, we want to deliver on citizens, not all of them, of course, but sometimes we can because your recommendations don't fit into. Should we be more accommodating to policy cycles, or should we ignore that? No, it's a debate. So I see you going back, Teele, but it's a debate. Should citizen assemblies also accommodate recommendation? Sorry, Frederick, again.
No worries.
I'm sure then I'm launching a big debate, but no, but it's also interesting to know other people in the room's ideas.
Definitely. So maybe we should
core questions going forward now.
Yeah.
Should we accommodate more policy cycles, or should citizens just be free to do what's your
Yeah, Eva, I can see you. Eva?
Yeah, maybe just to react to this. I mean, personally, I would like citizens to be able to not to fit in a policy cycle, but as someone who's worked for several years actually I worked in the Lithuanian government, and seeing from the inside the way that things work, I would be for very much fitting into the policy making cycle for the for the biggest possible impact in a way, because the machinery is really slowly, really multi-layered, really complicated, and at this point, unless we change it completely very fast, I think we're better off maximizing how we can fit into it. And then, but this is just my personal opinion.
Thank you. I just want to ask a last time, Stine, are there any questions that we should address or?
Right now, there's a lot of communication and specifically about communication and the importance of communication. So that's, and also if we should have work on having better democracy. So there's no really concrete questions, but a lot of reflections about this. So maybe you can also reflect a bit about it.
Great, thanks. I think we'll just continue with this. Maybe Teele or Roberto had a reflection on this balance between accommodating what politicians need some kind of input on, or if I understood correctly.
Just
Go. Please go.
Ladies first, yeah. And then Sylvia from Brazil also raised her hand. I don't think we should adjust to political cycles, because climate assemblies are deliberately designed for long-term issues, and we need to tackle them. So they are ideally fit in that context. What we should work with, I think, and this is from the video interview with Graham, actually, I posted the link there, is that we should be working with the openness of public sector, the openness to actually have the interest of hearing what people are saying, not just a small circle of the elected representatives, but the broader society, the citizens, the minorities, the well-heard groups, whoever. So that's the case, because we need to create much wider ownership for the very, very tough decisions and actions that we need to take in every society and as individuals. So I'm not for messing with the current system. I'm for system change.
Thank you. And Roberto?
My take on that, Yves, it's not really about to fit the political views. It's much more to be aware about the policymaking process. I mean, how policymaking works. And to be aware doesn't mean that you have to make recommendations that necessarily fit the specific stage of the policies, that are being made by the city council, the regional government. I mean, whatever. But I mean, I understand this also based on what I saw in Lisbon, and actually there was a huge request from participants to know more the state of play of policies on the topic that was selected by the city council itself. So this also, to me, goes back to some of the issues discussed about communication and sharing information with participants. What kind of information are they given? For example, are they given information about policies, about the ongoing public policies, ongoing projects, initiatives, whatever is somehow risks to be overlapping with the recommendations that they are doing, and so generate frustration because you're generating too high expectations in participants. For example, this aspect was not so well worked in Lisbon. We had some civil servants during the Citizen Assembly, but the information that the civil servants were there to help also, to give some technical information about what was going on, was not so clear. So not all of the participants took advantage of the civil servants. And when they found out that they could use that information, they got somehow frustrated. So we understand this as, the need to have some technical information, which doesn't mean to fit in what's really in place, but to be aware of what's already is already in place. That's helpful. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Roberto, for that input. Again, time is flying. And before I give the word to Mark to round off, I just want to give the word to Eva and Yves to have a chance to have a final word.
I was wondering what Sylvia has a question. So
okay.
I was wondering if she could perhaps ask the final question.
Sure. Sylvia.
Thank you. I know that time is rushing. No, I was just wondering because in this question about political cycle, I have worked in public opinion research for many years. And we know that public opinion surveys are used for as input for public policy making. And I have been witnessing that this doesn't work. So that's why I founded Delibera Brazil. And so I think if they can use public opinion surveys, why cannot use citizen assemblies as input for decisions that are made in the cabinets, I mean, by technicians in the bureaucracies. They are on the table of this staff for municipalities, and staff make these decisions. Why cannot this staff make a homework and offer to the citizen assemblies which kind of decision they are making, and ask citizen assemblies to make them? That's the kind of fitting in political cycle that we have in mind when we are designing our process here.
Thank you very much, Sylvia, for that comment. I think it's too big of a question to start addressing now, but at least it's some food for thought, and we can take that with us and maybe ask some policymakers why they don't use deliberative processes as they use public opinion polls.
With the social impact as well. I think that's why this social impact is so important. If people are if citizens are starting to realize that they actually have democratic power, that they actually can think along, act along, talk along with politicians, and that their decision making is actually often better, more ambitious, more coherent. I think if people are getting more aware of that, the popular voice, the voice of the public, will become more directed towards demanding even citizens' assemblies. So that's also why I think this social impact is so important, because in the end it has to come from citizens or from society itself, to make politics aware that they need us, that they need citizens to make proper decisions, especially when it comes to long-term decision-making.
And I think that was a very nice final note on this whole discussion. So thank you very much, Eva and Yves, for your hard work and for all your outputs. And thank you, Teele, Eva, and Roberto for participating in this panel. It's been a great day, and therefore I think Mark wants to say some final words.
I do. It has been a great day. It's been a long day. So Eva and Yves and Teele, Eva and Roberto, thank you so much for helping us round it off. I want to do a final experiment before I pass on a few last messages. The ones of us who are left, would everyone in the chat write a number between 1 and 5 to symbolize how many of the 5 sessions we've had today that you joined? I'm going to exemplify because I was here all day. So I'm going to write 5.
Sorry, can you repeat the task?
The task is to write the number of sessions that you joined. So we have had 5 sessions today. So how many of those have you been? And I see someone has been at 4.5 sessions. Well done, Stephanie. Okay, so I am going to just randomly pick someone here, because what I wanted to do is I wanted to give someone who's joined 5 a chance to say just one word on how the day has been for you. And I'm just going to take the first one because Laurie, you were so quick to write it. So Laurie, would you take the word and share with us very briefly what you take away from this day today?
Yeah, I mean, I think Knoca work is great, but I feel that we have to reach out to society. We're too much in our bubble. Yeah, so I thank everybody for their time and effort, but we got to do better. And I also don't have any great ideas, but I just know we have to do better. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Laurie. That's a fitting challenge posed to everyone here, because really what we are is we're a network of practitioners trying to move forward climate assemblies around the world. So this is the challenge that I think we're many here who are happy to take, but it's not a small challenge. Hopefully today has been a step towards sharing best practices, and hopefully everyone who's joined has something good to take with you from today. We know that today's program was quite packed. We hope you've enjoyed it, but I wanted to say that we're also a network that wants to be able to share as a community. And some of the events we host are more interactive. So do keep in mind that you can find all the future events on our website. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much for dedicating such a lot of your time, especially to those who are here for all 5 sessions. I am very impressed by that. And to finish with a reflection on Laurie's words, there is much work to be done, but we have begun, and that counts for something. So thank you, everyone. See you again, hopefully very soon.